Hello, I'm Howard. I've worked in UK railway engineering for nearly 20 years in everything from maintenance, renewals, and fault response to project work, design work, and management. I wanted to talk today about Far Cry 5 and Far Cry New Dawn. Far Cry New Dawn is just set in the same map as Far Cry 5. In fact, you can come back to this very spot at this very station, but it's after the collapse and the nuclear war. So that's quite interesting. But what I do in these reviews anyway is I just look at the railway in the video game and see what the developers got right, what they got wrong, what they maybe could have done better. I know not all games are supposed to be a rail sim and supposed to get everything 100% right, but it's just interesting for me to talk about and point out some of the real engineering design concepts along the way. Starting with this. This is flat bottom rail. This is very standard, widely used worldwide. They could also have gone for bullhead or double-sided rail, any of which is acceptable. And the rail here sits on these base plates. Again, a totally real design. And the base plates are screwed down into the sleeper, into the tie, with some screws, and then a rail spike is used to retain the rail foot. These are very realistic looking timbers and ballast. They've done a good job of modelling these. These look quite good. Um, some are different, some have splits in them. This is a good little variety of sleepers. They've got a set of points. So you can see who operates this particular railway. This is the Copperhead Railway, which is sort of a freight network. This is a lumber yard. Well, there's a lumber yard in it and a coal yard at another point. So or a mine. So it's that kind of thing. It's not a passenger service. So these are hand points. These are hand thrown points that work on a lever. So they grab that lever there with the black handle, and you move it from where it is, spin it 180 degrees almost, and land it on the retaining part at the other side there. The very common design. Hand points are everywhere in sidings and on sort of these goods and freight yards. It's a realistically modelled piece of kit. The only thing is it attaches to the stock rail there, which isn't going to move because the stock rail is the rail that doesn't move. So the stock rail being this rail that runs all the way down the outside, that's permanently affixed. The rails that move are the switch rails, which are in the middle. So there's one and two, and they are in the middle. The switch rails. Some games get this wrong and put the switch rail on the outside of the switch, but in Far Cry they've got it right. The two should be in the middle. But what is missing is a stretcher bar. So there should be a stretcher bar between the front two switch rails. And this little green and yellow indicator just tells the operator and the driver of the train which way the points are set. So green would be normal position for the switch, and the yellow would be the reverse position for the switch, depending on which way the handle is. So when they flick that handle round, it'll turn that in the middle and indicate the opposite way. This is a very nicely modelled little hand points machine. You can see it's screwed down, bolted down into the timbers, two long timbers. This is a very normal way to do it, to have two extended sleepers and bolt the machine down. The only complaint being that it's not actually affixed to the switch rail. Not that the switch rails would move together, because they're supposed to be connected in the middle by what's called a stretcher bar, or several of them, that maintain the gap between the two switch rails, so that if the gap was too wide between the switch rails, that rail would move a bit too far to the left and the train would hit the end of it. And the same when the points are swung the other way. You want to leave enough gap that side for the train axle to get through, for the wheel. So the stretcher bar is very important in maintaining the distance, because say even it was hooked up to that right hand rail, it would only move the right hand and the train would just hit the left hand one. So all this is missing really to be a good switch is a stretcher bar. And there's actually nothing holding this rail. You can see they've not put base plates through the movable portion of the switch, which the stock rails on the outside, you would need those still bolted down and in some kind of chair or base plate. The innermost rails you'd want them on a metal slide chair. So there'd be a piece of metal there, a flat piece of metal that you lubricate, and the switch rails would move side across on them to move over swiftly and efficiently, apply a bit of lubrication. They have done one thing good that a few games don't, is planed the rails down. So what you should have is you should have the rails come into a point like this, and instead of just a big chunk of rail, and the two switch rails do plane down to a point. They plane down a bit too quickly, but they've still thought to do it, which is good. This is a good little detail. Not all games have a crossing, and that's where the crossing nose would be usually a bit more pointed than that. But the fact they've got one in is good because not all games remember to put a crossing in. But it will allow the train wheels to pass in both directions. A lot of games make the mistake of having just rails clipping through each other. What is that? Oh no! Bad kitty. Another one of these hand point machines. This is a repeated design. These are everywhere. In this case, it's not actually anywhere near the end of a switch rail, so they've put it just sort of halfway down a rail here. The switch rails are a bit further up, so it's not really connected up to anything. But whoever designed this probably just fitted it from probably a bird's eye view rather than worrying about matching it up too much. It is just a minor detail in a game like this anyway. You're not really noticing it when you're running past shooting at bandits and being chased by mountain lions and also wolverines. This is a good thing that they get right. They get a lot of games make the mistake of having two rows of sleepers just end up clipping through each other, but these have gone for a proper long timber setup. These long bearers, they can be timber, concrete, various materials. But the point is, when it gets to this section, they're called the tied area of the switches and crossing. It should be these long bearers all the way through, and until you reach the separation point at the back, the end of the tied area. So some games make the mistake of having them clip through, but this is good. This is how the design would be. You'd have those long timbers there. Yes, this game has signals, which is really good to see, and this is a searchlight style signal, which is it only has one aspect, one place where the light emits from, and it changes colours. So I think looking at the rear of this, it's an LED rather than the old school electromechanical mechanism. But the basic function of these is that it has one aperture that the light shines out of, and then the lenses within it change around. So the light just shines through, and then you have a filter or a roundel, as they sometimes call it, where it'll be red, and then an electromechanical device will shift it with one polarity of electricity to green, and then the other way to yellow. And then if it fails safe and drops back to red. I think this is perhaps a modern LED equivalent where you might not have those roundels and the LEDs just flick from one color to another, because this box on the back, which is nicely wired in with glands and into the back of the signal and into the post, that's nicely wired in. But I think that is only big enough to house perhaps an LED housing. It's not big enough to hold the big electromechanical mechanism you see on the older ones. You can see on here it says danger high voltage keep out. Quite right. A lot of these are battery powered, so these in rural areas would quite often be battery powered, and they just replace the batteries out every now and then. There'd be a charger as well, perhaps. Some of these, this one's mounted in a cabinet. You could well have a battery bank and maybe even a charger in there. The signal number there, 943, that's just repeated on all of them. I think in real signaling they'd all have different ID plates. So this says, before performing arc welding operations in this container, follow instructions on label behind the door. And also it says danger propane. So I've got a couple of theories on this. What you can get, and I've seen online, railway companies can purchase propane-powered fuel cells, so a propane-powered little generator to charge batteries. So a propane-powered little battery charger. I've seen those. You can buy them. I've seen various articles and various places that sell them. So it could well be that that's what's in there. Here we are at Holland Valley Railway Station. You can tell that this is a bi-directional railway line with the lumber mill that way. By the way, there's one signal there at the end of the platform at this end and a signal there going the opposite direction. So this is one in, one out, bi-directional line. This train, this is a common theme with trains in this game. The carriages, not that I've seen any locomotives, but they're all really high up. I suspect that is a gameplay feature where they're so tall because it just doesn't match this little platform. Although the platforms at other places are right, I don't think these carriages are correctly proportioned. Oh, not again. Here we have a massive and visually stunning steel girder bridge over a large body of water. This thing's pretty huge, and like most bridges in this game, it's just a bit too wide, which has its problems. But looking at the rail here isn't secured to the deck of the bridge in any meaningful way, which is slightly disappointing because they've gone through the lengths of like really making a realistic set of timbers there, a timber deck, and they've pinned the rest down with base plates and spikes and screws. So they could have done something about this, although maybe they thought it was just a bit too numerous because they're a lot closer spaced than the other sleepers. But all the bridges in this game suffer with width, basically, because this bridge really is a lot larger than it needs to be for what a single track railway. It's far too wide, which translates in engineering terms into thousands of tons of excess materials and therefore cost that you didn't really need. So maybe, oh, and that goes for most of the bridges in this game, as we'll see. But the thing itself, I'm glad they did make it that big because it does look excellent. Look at that with the morning sun. This really is a visually brilliant game. It's there's not many games knocking around in even 2024 and five that look quite this good with especially with the lighting. But you see there the big columns and piers. They're called the big concrete columns piers and the pier caps, the bit on the top. You can see the bearings underneath the load bearing girders, the abutment there on the right hand side that goes into the rock face. It's obviously going to be piled into this river bed. And if we have a look around this side, you can see on top of the pier cap, you can see this bit, which is the bearing. That's the actual load bearing piece of the bridge that puts the force down into the columns below. Here we have a level crossing, and this is classic American equipment. So that the red and white part, I think in the USA they would call that the gate arm. Here we would call that the barrier boom, and that the mechanism is in this box. And the mechanism in this will consist of a motor and a series of electrical detection lever bands that will perform various functions to detect when this barrier is fully up, detect when it's fully lowered, and it will have a middle drive band as well, whereby the whilst the barrier is in the lowering or raising position, it will keep it lowering or raising by operating or slowing the motor. Nice signage there. Good to have a bit of signage. That's very important for people to know what's going on at the crossing. This, I assume, would be the equipment housing. So the level crossing will be operated by presumably a series of relays. So when a track circuit on approach to the crossing occupies, a relay will drop out, and that'll have a contact on the back of it that starts the lights flashing, and then there'll be a timer relay that 3 to 5 seconds after that the barriers begin to lower, and then when the barriers are lowered, a relay will kick in to give the down detection to clear the signals. So there'll be a little equipment room there with all the relays in it. Oh, not again. Also, one of the very few games where you can race deer down the railway line in such stunning definition as well. So there's some rockfall in this area. Rockfall, a very real hazard, very real danger on the railway. Only last year or the year before, there was a train derailed in Scotland due to rockfall. It had fallen in the forefoot. But the Scottish do consider this. They have something in the Pass of Brander called Anderson's piano, which is it's called that because of the many tensioned wire strings that it has. So signals up there are semaphores, which are mechanical and they work off a wire. So the signaler pulls the lever, and the lever pulls a wire, and the wire pulls the signal arm and makes it go up to say proceed. and then when he drops the lever back in, the signal goes back to horizontal, and which says stop, danger. So what they've done between the semaphores up there is they've set basically a series of trip wires, a series of tensioned wires between the signals, and if a rock falls down the cutting, it cuts the wire essentially, and then the signals, no matter what position they're in, will fall back to a danger position and say to the train, "Don't pass." There's been a rock fall here, because it's cut the wires and the signal's gone back into the down position. So there's more modern equivalents now. You can get all sorts of rockfall detectors, ones that use laser beams and infrared and sort of more technical means. But you can signal for that. You can signal for rockfall to protect trains. And the bit that we saw there is one of the lesser um, danger areas for rockfall in this game. There's some much worse ones. And here we see another one of these wide bridges. So it's a very wide bridge, much wider than it needs to be. Again, perhaps just a waste of materials, unless those bits on the sides are walking routes for the locals as well. This is a wooden trestle bridge, and they don't build these much anymore. This is probably a relic from the old days that they just kept and built over. Normally, what would happen in the older days is they'd build the trestle bridge out of wood, and then they'd use the railway line once it was constructed to bring materials back and make a bit more of a permanent bridge. See, you've gone from that enormous steel girder bridge to that piece of wooden trestle. So maybe they didn't get around to replacing that one yet, or they could just leave it like that, seeing as the railway appears to be abandoned there now anyway. The Copperhead. Here we are at Copperhead Railway Yard. This also looks to serve as the maintenance depot because we've got these piles of rail and sleepers here, what look to be sleepers. You can see the end profile of the flat bottom rail there. That's good. Although these lengths of rail are much shorter than what would be useful. So you'd normally have about 60-foot lengths, or something that's similar. These are too short to be useful, really. The only reason I could think of for them being this short is if these are scrap, and they've cut these up into manageable pieces just to stack and get rid of and
The
recycle,
rail
maybe,
is called a
because
wire.
it's just you wouldn't bother bolting
I
that
asked
in,
how she did that, and
and
she
fish
told
plating it
me.
in and sticking a joint
That's
bar
what
on it.
they say.
It's too short of a piece.
Are you gonna
Not that
teach
I
me?
haven't seen any joints in this game, so either it's continuously welded long rail, which probably not, or they've just not bothered putting joints in because it's probably a bit too much effort to. So this game then, they've got a lot of stuff right, just missing a few minor details. So they've got the correct equipment on level crossings, equipment housings. They've got a crossing deck there made of wood. That's good. The sleepers are very realistic looking. They've got ballast, and the railway makes sense as to where it leads and its purpose. And they've not got any totally crazy gradients and curves. They've got appropriate style signals. They've got hand swung points. It's a realistic sort of layout. It's believable in game terms. I wouldn't be playing the game and thinking this is totally
Our world is
outrageous and
filled with
unrealistic.
history
This unusual haunted tunnel that we're in at the moment.
and
But
traditions.
how unusual. So the points were missing some minor stuff like the stretcher bars, the heel blocks. The crossing wasn't quite right. They could have put check rails in. Seen other games put check rails in. But all in all, this is a pretty solid effort. It's about a 6 out of 10. Maybe 7 if I was feeling particularly generous, but it's around a 6.5. They've got some of the right stuff, but not all of it. There's better games and there's worse games, but overall, a solid effort, and it's really enjoyable to play. At no point are you playing this and thinking, "Wow, this is immersionally breaking, unrealistic." So, in that sense, they've done the
If you
job.
find yourself running low
So,
on funds,
very good.
the best way to make a quick
Thanks for
buck is
tuning
throw
in.